Hello, this is Dave. Today I want to talk about what I consider to be the biggest lie of all. It's a subject I've been looking at for the last 6 months, and I've been pretty hesitant to talk about it because, it's a really controversial subject. Now, I stumbled across this completely by accident. I was researching something on a totally unrelated topic and happened to see an intriguing sounding video. So I clicked on it, but the subject was so preposterous that I was just about to turn it off when it happened to say something that piqued my interest. So I watched the video completely to the end. And by the end of it, I had questions. I had some serious questions. So I'm going to ask you to be open-minded about this. This is very, very controversial and difficult to get your head round. So just bear with this and keep an open mind. So, in order to determine the truth, I'm going to be using a few principles here. The first of which is the scientific method, something that the scientific community doesn't seem to use these days. But the scientific method is where a theory or opinion is put forward that matches what we observe. But if something comes along that contradicts those observations, then the theory must be discarded. The second principle is Occam's razor. That's quite simply the simplest explanation tends to be the truth. The third principle I'm going to be using is from Sherlock Holmes. When the impossible has been eliminated, whatever is left, however improbable, must be the truth. I'm also going to have to accept a couple of things. The first of which is what I call the ant's perspective. If you imagine an ant walking across a runway and all of a sudden a jumbo jet lands next to it, the ant's probably going to say, "What the hell was that?" But there is no way that the ant can ever figure out what just happened to it. It's just beyond the ant's ability to comprehend. So we have to accept that there may be things that are way beyond the human mind's ability to comprehend. The other thing we have to accept is how easily our minds, once they've been programmed or given a world view, how easily those minds can be fooled. You started watching that video with a certain worldview. After all, you know what a room looks like. But those preconceptions caused you to ignore some of the subtle cues that would have given the game away, such as the black rectangle underneath the chair, or the difference in colour between the cups, or even the strange angles of the picture on the wall. You believed a visual lie because your worldview was so powerful that it blinded you to any evidence that contradicted it. The other thing I'd like to mention at this point is how easily we can be fooled by two-dimensional imagery. We've been trained and conditioned to suspend disbelief when we see certain two-dimensional imagery, such as photographs. A photograph is not reality. It's a photograph. And photographs can be altered and manipulated. Video is not reality. And here's some examples of that. Pretty realistic stuff. Point is, you can't automatically trust any two-dimensional imagery or media that's presented to you by the establishment. So let's get down to it then, shall we? This is apparently the truth of our world. We live on a spherical planet called Earth, spinning at 1,000 miles an hour on a 23.4 degree tilt. Now, I always thought it was 23.5 degrees, but as I researched into this, I found it was actually 23.4. That's 23.4 degrees away from vertical. Funnily enough, that leaves 66.6 degrees away from the horizontal. Interesting. So anyway, we're orbiting an ordinary star that is apparently 93 million miles away. The Sun itself is embedded in a galaxy of 100 billion stars, and that galaxy is one of trillions and trillions in an infinite and expanding void. And in the midst of that void, we are just an insignificant and unimportant microbe that arrived here by accident, that's crawling around on this speck of dust. Now, I know what you're thinking. Oh dear, he's turned into one of those flat earther people. But if you've ever discovered the truth behind all those things that have been labelled as conspiracy theories, you've been willing to set aside your preconceptions of the world to be able to accept a new and often terrifying version. This is no different, so please bear with me. The first thing that people will automatically say is, of course we live on a spherical Earth. We've got the photographic evidence, don't we? Well, strangely enough, when you try and search for a picture of Earth from space, you'll find surprisingly few of them. In fact, all of them, including this one, this is from NASA, it's called the Big Blue Marble. All of them are composites. NASA will freely admit to them being composite images or CGI or Photoshop. There's only one image that NASA will claim was shot from space, and it's this one. It's apparently shot from Apollo 17. But all of these images have problems. First of all, the scientist will tell you that because the Earth is spinning, centrifugal forces will force the equator to bulge out as it's spinning. So the Earth is more of an oblate spheroid. But, funnily enough, all the images from space, supposedly, are perfect spheres. Also, one thing I noticed is that the colours of continents and the sea itself, they're very vivid. Now, when you look at anything at a distance, maybe if you look at some hills at the distance of 3 or 4 miles, you'll see that the colours are kind of washed out somewhat because of the atmosphere. If you see mountains further off in the distance, the dark colours are washed out even more because of the influence of the atmosphere. So how can it be that you get these very vivid, striking colours through miles of atmosphere? I can't explain it. The other strange thing about this supposed shot of Earth from space is that the continents actually appear to match the Mercator map rather than the Peters projection map. Now, if you don't know the difference, here's a little video to explain it.
Should we begin?
Yes. Plain and simple, we'd like President Bartlett to aggressively support legislation that would make it mandatory for every public school in America to teach geography using the Peters projection map instead of the traditional Mercator.
Give me $200 and it's done.
Really? No. Why are we changing maps?
Because, CJ, the Mercator projection has fostered European imperialist attitudes for centuries and created an ethnic bias against the Third World.
Really?
The German cartographer, Mercator, originally designed this map in 1569 as a navigational tool for European sailors.
The map enlarges areas at the poles to create straight lines of constant bearing or geographic direction.
So it makes it easier to cross an ocean.
But
Yes.
It distorts the relative size of nations and continents.
Are you saying the map is wrong?
Oh dear, yes. Look at Greenland.
Okay.
Now look at Africa.
Okay.
The two land masses appear to be roughly the same size.
Yes.
Would it blow your mind if I told you that Africa is in reality 14 times larger?
Yes?
Here we have Europe, drawn considerably larger than South America. When it's 6.9 million square miles, South America is almost double the size of Europe's 3.8 million.
Alaska appears 3 times as large as Mexico, when Mexico is larger by 0.1 million square miles.
Germany appears in the middle of the map when it's in the northernmost quarter of the Earth.
Wait. Relative size is one thing, but you're telling me that Germany isn't where we think it is?
Nothing's where you think it is.
Where is it?
I'm glad you asked. The Peters projection.
It has fidelity of axis.
Fidelity of position.
East-west lines are parallel and intersect north-south axes at right angles.
What the hell is that?
It's where you've been living this whole time. Should we continue?
Uh-huh.
So, you're probably wondering what all of this has to do with social equality.
No, I'm wondering where France really is.
Guys, we want to thank you very much for coming in.
Hang on. We're going to finish this.
Okay.
What do maps have to do with social equality, you ask?
She asked.
Salvatore Natoli of the National Council for Social Studies argues, in our society, we unconsciously equate size with importance and even power.
I'm going to check in on Tobin.
Go.
These guys find Brigadoon on that map. You'll call me, right?
Probably not.
Okay.
When third world countries are misrepresented, they're likely to be valued less. When Mercator maps exaggerate the importance of Western civilization, when the top of the map is given to the Northern Hemisphere and the bottom is given to the Southern, then people will tend to adopt top and bottom attitudes.
But wait, where else could you put the Northern Hemisphere but on the top?
On the bottom.
How?
Like this.
Yeah, but you can't do that.
Why not?
Because it's freaking me out.
So the Mercator map was designed as a navigational aid, but the Peters projection map is a more accurate rendering of what the continents look like. So why then do all the images of Earth from space show the Mercator map? I guess that's because that's what we're used to. Even the one image that is claimed to be an actual photograph of Earth from space is called into question, simply because of a film that was released accidentally by NASA of Apollo 11 faking the very first picture of Earth from space. So let's have a look at that video.
An old reel received by mistake. It contains the raw or unedited footage of the crew of Apollo 11, Michael Collins, Edwin Aldrin Jr. and Neil Armstrong, staging part of their mission for nearly an hour in living color, with exceptionally clear behind-the-scenes audio of conversations discussing the techniques used to achieve a disingenuous picture depicting the Earth at a distance, in order to falsely demonstrate their far journey from it and their ability to survive passing through the Van Allen radiation belts. It cannot be misconstrued that this staging was done for some other reason, for the reel itself is slated and dated July 18th, 19th and 20th, 1969, the very days of the mission when they were said to be approaching and achieving lunar orbit. Understand, too, that only about 20 seconds of this raw footage was ever broadcast to the public, and these conversations discussing their deception were believed to be private. Until now. Here they discuss that these television transmissions were in fact not broadcast live as everyone believed. They were first screened and edited for playback later.
Roger, Neil. We just wanted a narrative such that we can, when we get to playback, we can sort of correlate what we're so much.
Here they discuss the fact that they have turned out the lights and have blocked out sunlight from entering the spacecraft through the other windows, as to not cause any reflected light to fall onto the spacecraft's wall in the foreground.
Okay, very good. Well, shut out the sun coming in some of the other windows into the spacecraft, so it's looking through the number one window, and there isn't any reflected light.
The reason this was done is so that the truth of the matter would not be revealed. It is this. Though the federal government would have you believe that this is a view of Earth from a distance out of the spacecraft's window as it nears the moon, it is not. What they have ingeniously done is placed the camera at the back of the spacecraft and centered the lens on a circular window in the foreground, outside of which it is completely filled with the Earth in low orbit. The circumference of the window then appears to be the diameter of the Earth at a distance, with the darkened walls of the spacecraft appearing to be the blackness of space around it. That is why they wanted the interior dark and blocked out the sun from any other windows. Here you can see the extruded window, probably 2 inches thick at the bottom. This is because the Earth's shine is coming in at a downward angle. It also causes the Earth to appear to be an irregularly shaped circle, for you are seeing the outside of the window at the bottom and the inside of the window at the top, which together form 2 different sized halves of a circle. Subsequently, this take was never used. As they perfected the shot, a crescent-shaped piece of black material was inset slightly into the window to create the illusion of the Earth's terminator line dividing night and day. It is uncannily convincing. During this segment, intended to be edited and played back later for the worldwide television audience, dated July 18, 1969, Neil Armstrong condemns himself as he states that he is 130,000 miles out, or halfway to the moon, as the NASA flight log also states on this date, when he is in reality in low Earth orbit of a few hundred miles.
Roger, Houston, Apollo 11. Calling in from about 130,000 miles out.
Here, during another segment, also intended to air after review, Neil Armstrong falsely explains to the viewers how the shot is attained by putting the camera's lens to the window's glass, as it would have to be if they were the claimed distance away from the Earth.
We only have one window that has a view of the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera.
If the window was completely filled up with a TV camera, as he stated, then an astronaut's arm would not be able to get between the camera and the window, as it obviously does here in this outtake.
South America becomes invisible just off beyond the terminator or inside the shadow.
You can also notice how the astronaut operating the camera reacted to the mistake by attempting to pan away from it.
Blue gas, see white bands of major cloud formations across the Earth. And
This is a segment that they believed wasn't even being recorded, much less suitable for broadcast, for the lens was being zoomed out and the scene was being changed to that of an interior of the astronauts at work, and apparently the stop button popped back up on the recorder without notice. Here is the diffused work light that they used to see camera controls, but not throw light onto the spacecraft's wall. Here they remove part of the crescent insert. Finally, the iris is opened up to see the real location of the camera and the very bright and near Earth out the window. Here is the slate for the 19th of July, and the same shot of trickery on the 19th of July, and then the 20th, and the same misleading shot on the 20th. Later that evening, they were said to be walking on the moon. How can this be when they were in Earth orbit only 9 hours earlier, and the moon is some 3 days' journey?
And you can see the full sequence on a documentary called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. That's one that I highly recommend you have a look at. But as for photographic evidence of a globe Earth, nope, it doesn't exist.